Racist nurse attacks black mother but panics upon discovering her husband's true identity. What would happen if a simple medical appointment transformed a family's life and exposed the deep wounds of a society? This is the question that lingers in the air when Amara Johnson, a black mother and social worker, enters a public hospital in Atlanta seeking help for her sick daughter. What should have been a moment of care and compassion turns into a tense and uncomfortable encounter with Linda Collins, a 45-year-old nurse marked by prejudices that emerge in an environment that should be welcoming. When Linda, with her cold and hostile demeanor, verbally assaults Amara, she completely ignores the identity of the patient's husband, David Carter, a renowned lawyer known for fighting against discrimination. Upon discovering who he is, Linda finds herself trapped in a panic that will reveal the layers of prejudice and power in a small American town. Amara, 32, is a strong and determined woman, immensely proud of her roots. She works at a non-profit organization that supports women who are victims of violence, facing the challenges of a world that often proves hostile. On that fateful morning, as she takes her daughter to the hospital, Amara expected to find support, but what she received was Linda's coldness, disguised as professionalism. The pressure of being a protective mother intensifies as she perceives the nurse's suspicious gaze and rude treatment. Each word from Linda makes her feel disrespected, but she remains steadfast, focusing on her daughter's health. Linda Collins, on the other hand, lives in a middle-class neighborhood where her personal and professional frustrations accumulate. The nurse projects her insecurities and resentments onto patients from humble backgrounds, convinced that her behavior is merely a manifestation of professionalism. However, her lack of empathy reveals a personality that struggles against the shadows of her own prejudice. As she conducts the consultation, Linda's disdain transforms into an aggression that crosses the boundaries of professional ethics. When Amara finally shares her experience at home with David, his indignation is palpable. David, a 40-year-old lawyer, is known for his tireless fight for civil rights and equality. He feels compelled to act, not only for his wife, but for all those who face discrimination. The tension escalates when he decides to confront Linda directly, turning the hospital into a moral battleground. The confrontation between David and Linda in the hospital reception becomes a decisive moment. David's courage in publicly exposing Linda's behavior not only challenges the nurse but also provokes deep reflection within the community. Amara and David's fight against injustice is not just a personal battle, but a call to action for all who witness discrimination. As the story unfolds, the interactions between the characters reveal the complexities of their lives and their struggle against prejudice. Amara, determined to seek justice, finds support within the community. Linda, in turn, is confronted with the consequences of her actions, leading her to question her beliefs and confront what it truly means to be a healthcare professional. This poignant narrative not only highlights the struggle of a mother and her husband, but also exposes the fissures in a society still grappling with the challenges of racism and discrimination. What may seem like merely a conflict in a hospital becomes a mirror reflecting the silent struggles of many, inviting the reader to reflect on their own beliefs and attitudes. Amara felt a lump in her throat as she watched her 5-year-old daughter Maya comfortably settled in the hospital bed. The girl's high fever and persistent cough had brought them to this place where Amara had hoped to find care and attention. However, upon being greeted by Linda, the nurse, the feeling of welcome quickly dissipated. Linda's cold looks and cutting words struck Amara like daggers. Amara had always been a strong woman, but in that moment she felt vulnerable and powerless. Linda, for her part, was having a bad day. The pressure to handle an increasing patient load and the tensions of her personal life left her irritated. Her husband, a mechanic, had lost a major contract, and bills were starting to pile up. She couldn't see beyond her own frustration. Looking at Amara, she saw only a desperate mother, not the professional who might understand the weight of her words. When Linda fired off an insensitive comment about Amara's ability to care for her daughter, the nurse failed to realize she was crossing a dangerous line. At the moment, Amara confronted Linda. Her heart raced. She thought of all the struggles she had faced in her life, from childhood to her training as a social worker. The words that came out of her mouth were measured and firm, but the pain she felt inside was palpable. How was it possible that, in a place designed for healing, she felt so attacked? The indignation began to turn into a flame burning within her, challenging her not to be shaken. When Amara arrived home, frustration still pulsed within her. David, who had always been her safe harbor, immediately sensed that something was wrong. Upon hearing his wife recount the incident, he felt a growing heat of indignation. What should have been a moment of care had turned into a battle against deep-seated prejudices. David knew that Linda's behavior was not an isolated case, but rather a reflection of a society that often failed to see the human being behind the color of their skin. Meanwhile, Linda tried to justify her actions to herself. She wasn't a bad person, she thought. She was just a professional who was overwhelmed and tired. But as the days went by, the weight of her words began to manifest in her mind. Conversations with colleagues, who shared their own stories of prejudice and discrimination, made her question her worldview. That interaction with Amara haunted her, a constant reminder that her biases could have devastating consequences. David decided he needed to take action. He started planning a meeting with the hospital administration, determined to expose Linda's behavior and seek change. He knew this would not be an easy task. Many might see him as a troublemaker, or someone trying to create problems. However, his passion for justice and his family's well-being drove him to move forward. Amara and David's struggle was personal, but it was also becoming a larger fight, a call to action for those who felt powerless in the face of discrimination. Amara, on the other hand, was facing her own challenges. The pressure to be a strong and independent mother made her question her ability to handle the situation. Every day she wondered if she was doing enough for Maya. The sleepless nights, during which her daughter's fever kept her awake, fueled her insecurities. She remembered her childhood, when her mother struggled to raise her children alone, and wondered if she was living up to that legacy. As the conflict intensified, new figures began to emerge in Amara and David's lives. They found support in a community of local activists who were also fighting against discrimination. Among them was Sarah, a young medical student who had become friends with David. She shared her experiences of prejudice in healthcare settings and offered to help raise a voice against injustices. The friendship that formed between Sarah and Amara brought a new perspective, but also challenges, as Sarah struggled to balance her studies and her newfound passion for the cause. As the challenges grew, Amara felt torn between her personal struggle and the new responsibility she was taking on. What started as an isolated incident in a hospital was now unfolding into a battle for dignity and respect, not just for her and her family, but for the entire community. Each day, the line between pain and hope grew thinner, and Amara found herself facing a dilemma: fight for justice or retreat into the safety of silence. Every decision she made led her down a new path, filled with uncertainties but also possibilities for change. Amara felt the weight of expectations bearing down on her shoulders. She had decided that she would not let the incident at the hospital go unnoticed, but with every step she took, uncertainty accompanied her. The idea of confronting Linda and the hospital administration made her nervous. She knew that to make a difference, she would need to be strong, but doubt consumed her. What if her voice went unheard? What if her words only caused more division? Each time she thought about it, her throat tightened and anxiety left her breathless. Before continuing with this emotional story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories, and let us know which city you're watching this video from in the comments. That morning, as she prepared for the meeting with the administration, Amara looked at Maya, who was still recovering from her fever. The girl was more cheerful, playing with her toys, but Amara could not concentrate. The image of her daughter inspired her, but it also brought a deep fear. What if she failed? The thought tormented her, and tears threatened to spill. Amara took a deep breath, trying to remind herself that she was fighting for something greater than herself. David, for his part, felt the pressure mounting. He had spoken with Sarah, who supported him in his struggle, but the prospect of facing the hospital administration left him uneasy. He knew he could not let the injustice go unpunished, but a part of him wondered if this was truly the right path. What would happen if the administration ignored his complaints? What if it resulted in retaliation against Amara? As he prepared for the meeting, worry consumed him. In the meeting, the tension was palpable. Amara and David entered the room, where they were met by a team of administrators who seemed more interested in protecting the hospital's image than in hearing their concerns. Amara began to speak, her voice steady yet trembling. She described the painful experience she had with Linda, but as she spoke, she noticed the uninterested expressions on the administrators' faces. They interrupted her several times, trying to divert the focus from what truly mattered. Frustration began to grow within her. and the feeling of powerlessness threatened to overwhelm her. With each evasive response from the administrators, Amara felt a knot forming in her stomach. It was as if her words were thrown into a void, unacknowledged. David, noticing his wife's disillusionment, decided to intervene. He stood up, his voice firm, and began to speak about the need for empathy and respect in patient care. The passion in his words seemed to resonate with the team, but still, the responses remained cold and distant. Meanwhile, Linda, who was on duty that day, could not help but overhear the conversations echoing in the hallway. The memory of her interaction with Amara troubled her. She tried to focus on her work, but Amara's words echoed in her mind. Linda knew she could not remain indifferent to what was happening. She decided she needed to take action, even if it meant confronting her own guilt. The tension escalated. Amara and David felt increasingly frustrated, and the meeting seemed like a waste of time. When they finally finished, Amara was desolate. The hope she had of being heard faded away, and the feeling of defeat enveloped her. As she left the room, she felt her strength waning. The struggle seemed endless, and the idea of giving up crossed her mind. David, noticing the change in Amara's disposition, tried to comfort her. He reminded her that the fight for justice was often long and difficult. "We are not alone in this," he said, holding her hand. "We need to keep fighting, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who has gone through this." His words brought some comfort, but insecurity still loomed over Amara. The following week, Sarah approached Amara, offering support. They began to work together on a project to raise awareness about discrimination in healthcare settings. As they got closer, Amara realized that her friendship with Sarah was a light in the midst of darkness. However, the journey was not easy. Sarah was struggling to balance her studies and the new cause, often feeling overwhelmed. Amara, in turn, felt guilty for demanding so much from the young woman and began to question whether she was being selfish in seeking support. These conflicts created tension between the two, leading to misunderstandings about the direction of the project. Sarah wanted the approach to be more direct and confrontational, while Amara preferred a softer, more conciliatory approach. The differences began to cause friction, and the blossoming friendship threatened to crumble. Amara felt guilty, but was also determined not to let anything hinder the fight for justice. As the battle intensified, Amara realized that the true fight was also against her own fears and insecurities. Every obstacle she faced forced her to confront the limitations she had imposed on herself. She began to understand that her voice mattered, and that, even if the journey was filled with setbacks, every small step counted. Amara's struggle was not only for her daughter, but for all the voices that had been silenced, and this awareness drove her to keep moving forward, even in the face of fear and uncertainty. Amara was determined not to give up, but the weight of frustration accompanied her. The following weeks after the meeting were a whirlwind of emotions. She and David continued to work for the cause, but the lack of support from the hospital administration made everything harder. Each day, anxiety grew, and even with Sarah's help, the struggle felt lonely. It was on a rainy afternoon that everything changed. Amara was at home, reviewing some documents about discrimination in patient care, when she received a message from Sarah. The young woman seemed agitated and urgently requested to meet. Amara felt a tightness in her chest. What could be so urgent? As soon as she arrived at the cafe where they met, she noticed that Sarah was visibly shaken. Her eyes were watery, and she was trembling slightly. Amara sat across from her, concerned. "What happened?" she asked, trying to stay calm. Sarah took a deep breath and, with a trembling voice, shared that she had received an anonymous tip about a case of discrimination at the hospital. The report was about a nurse who had refused to attend to a patient because of their sexual orientation. The nurse in question was, to Amara's surprise, Linda. The revelation hit Amara like a punch to the stomach. Linda, the same nurse who had treated her with disdain, now seemed to be at the center of another serious situation. Sarah continued to explain that the report was being investigated and that the hospital administration was under pressure to address the situation. Amara felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a glimmer of hope, but at the same time, doubt consumed her. What did this mean for her fight? And more importantly, what to do with this new information? The conversation between them intensified. Sarah, excited about the possibility of using the situation to draw attention to discrimination in the hospital, wanted Amara to speak out. "This is our chance," she exclaimed. "We can use this to show that we need real change." But Amara hesitated. The idea of exposing Linda troubled her. She knew that the nurse was also human, with her flaws and insecurities. What if we do this and nothing changes? What if it only makes things worse? Amara questioned, her voice laden with uncertainty. The tension between the two escalated. Sarah was convinced that the situation should be used as an example, but Amara worried about the consequences. They were at a turning point, and Sarah's words echoed in Amara's mind. Was it time to confront her own fears and insecurities about the fight they were waging? Amara returned home with a heavy heart. As she watched Maya play on the couch, she felt a whirlwind of emotions. The idea of exposing Linda while trying to fight for justice seemed contradictory. What if this struggle led her to become what she despised most? That night, while Maya slept, Amara reflected on her choices. She realized that she had always feared being seen as a bitter woman, one who allowed resentment to take over. But at the same time, she didn't want injustice to be ignored. What was more important, compassion or the fight for justice? Her mind was in a cycle, and she couldn't find a clear answer. The next day, Amara decided she needed to confront Linda. The nurse was not just a distant figure, she was part of the system Amara wanted to change. What if Linda was also willing to learn and change? This possibility intrigued her, but the idea of confrontation made her nervous. Upon arriving at the hospital, the atmosphere was tense. Amara walked through the corridors, her heart racing. When she finally found Linda, the nurse was alone in a break room. Linda's expression was one of fatigue and concern. The atmosphere between them was palpable. "We need to talk," Amara said, her voice firm yet gentle. Linda looked up, surprised. What Amara didn't know was that Linda had already reflected on her behavior and was willing to listen. The conversation that followed was charged with emotion. Amara expressed her frustrations, but also her desire for Linda to understand the impact of her actions. Linda, in turn, admitted her failings and shared how her own insecurities had led her to behave that way. The two women, so different, found a common space of vulnerability. From that moment on, Amara realized that the struggle for justice wasn't just about confrontations and accusations. It was also about empathy and understanding. This revelation made her reconsider her choices, realizing that the path to change could be more complex than she had imagined. The fight was not only against the system, but also against human pain and flaws, including her own. This new perspective illuminated her journey, showing that every step, even the hardest ones, could lead to significant understanding and transformation. Amara left the break room with a new weight on her shoulders. The conversation with Linda had been intense, and she felt that a small but meaningful progress had been made. However, the reality of the situation still surrounded her, and the struggle unfolding in the hospital seemed far from resolved. In the following days, Amara found herself in a whirlwind of emotions. The sense of relief she had after the conversation with Linda quickly dissipated, giving way to anxiety. The discrimination case was being widely discussed among the staff, and the pressure on the hospital administration was only increasing. Amara realized that although she had found a small moment of connection with Linda, the change she so desired still felt like a distant dream. Each new day brought heightened pressure. Sarah was increasingly excited about using Linda's situation to draw attention to discrimination in general. She insisted that Amara join her in a meeting with other team members where they could discuss the need for changes. However, Amara hesitated. The idea of exposing Linda and her flaws distressed her, as if she were betraying the trust she had begun to establish. One afternoon, while reviewing the documents she had collected, Amara decided to take a walk in the nearby park. The fresh air and the sound of leaves rustling in the wind helped clear her mind. But even there, her internal battle did not abandon her. Watching children play and laugh, she remembered Maya, her daughter, and how she wished for a better world for her. This memory was a powerful reminder of why she was fighting. That same night, Amara had a moment of introspection. While preparing dinner, she thought of all the times she had felt invisible, not only as a woman but also as a professional. The emotional wounds she carried made her question whether she was truly making a difference. What troubled her most was the idea that even if she achieved the changes she so desired, there would still be more battles to fight. As the days passed, the tension in the hospital seemed to increase. Amara noticed that the atmosphere among the staff was divided. Some supported the cause, while others seemed hesitant, worried about the repercussions. Linda, for her part, was more isolated, and Amara felt that the nurse was dealing with her own emotional burden. In one of the conversations she had with Sarah, Amara expressed her concern. "I don't want this to turn into a personal attack," she said. "We need to find a way to address the issue without destroying lives." Sarah looked at her with understanding but also with determination. "I understand, but we need to act. If we do nothing, these situations will keep happening. And if we're not the voice for those who don't have one?" Sarah's response echoed in Amara's mind. She knew there was truth in her friend's words, but the idea of acting at another person's expense still troubled her. In an effort to cope with the situation, Amara decided to seek more information about how discrimination affected patients in the hospital. She spoke with colleagues, listened to patients' stories, and tried to understand the real impact of professionals' actions like Linda's. With each account, she felt more motivated to fight. The struggle for justice was not just about exposing wrongs, but also about educating and creating a better environment for everyone. One night, as she prepared for bed, Amara received a message from Linda. The nurse seemed vulnerable and asked to meet again. Amara hesitated but knew that the opportunity to continue the conversation could be valuable. She decided that if Linda was willing to listen, she was also willing to speak. The next morning, Amara met Linda at a cafe near the hospital. The ensuing conversation was more open, with both sharing their experiences and fears. Amara realized that Linda was also struggling with her insecurities and biases. They discussed the challenges they faced, and Amara saw a spark of understanding in Linda's eyes. Although much remained to be done, that dialogue became a turning point for both. Amara returned home with a new perspective. Although the fight for justice was far from easy, she felt more prepared to face the challenges ahead. She knew that change would not happen overnight, but each conversation, each step, brought her closer to what she wanted to see. And more importantly, Amara realized that compassion could coexist with the struggle for justice, and that perhaps this was the key to making the difference she so longed for. Amara walked through the streets after the conversation at the cafe, feeling a mix of relief and hope. Although there were still many challenges ahead, her dialogue with Linda had been a turning point. She was not alone in this struggle. Others were willing to listen and learn. This new perspective helped her realize that true change begins within herself. In the following days, Amara dedicated herself to listening more. She spoke with colleagues and patients, trying to understand different viewpoints. With each story she heard, a new layer of understanding formed within her. She realized that many of her colleagues were also grappling with their own insecurities. This connection made her see that everyone had their personal battles, and it helped her recognize the humanity in those around her. The pressure in the hospital was still palpable. Amara observed how the administration tried to handle the complaints, but dissatisfaction continued to grow. She remembered what Sarah had said about being the voice for those who had no voice. The idea was beginning to take root in her mind. What did it really mean to be that voice? Was it just about shouting out injustices, or also about learning to listen? One morning, while organizing her materials, Amara found a note she had written some time ago. In it, she had jotted down her hopes and fears. Reading it brought a wave of nostalgia. It had been a long time since she reflected on her own emotions. That moment of introspection made her realize that to truly help others, she first needed to help herself. It was time to stop questioning herself and start trusting herself more. That same week, Amara decided to enroll in a workshop on communication and empathy. She knew she needed to develop her skills to become a more effective advocate for those who were being harmed. Alongside other healthcare professionals, Amara learned to listen actively and express her own experiences clearly and respectfully. The training not only helped her improve her communication, but also made her see the importance of vulnerability. Through sharing stories, she was able to connect with others on a deeper level. As time went on, Amara also began to apply these new lessons in her personal life. At home, she talked with her daughter, Maya, about the importance of being kind and listening to others. Sharing stories about empathy, Amara realized that she was not only teaching, but also learning from her daughter's innocence. That exchange gave her a new perspective on what it meant to be a role model. Maya's growth reflected her own growth. Her friendship with Sarah also evolved. They started planning an event at the hospital to raise awareness about discrimination and empathy. Amara realized that by joining forces with Sarah, she was not only advocating for a cause, but also creating a safe space for everyone to express themselves. Together, they were able to create an environment where voices were heard and respected. A few weeks later, the event finally took place. The auditorium was filled with colleagues and patients, all ready to listen and share. As Amara took the stage, she felt a flutter of nerves but also a growing confidence. She began to speak about her experiences, emphasizing the importance of listening and learning from others. Looking out at the audience, she realized she was not alone. That room was full of people who also wanted to change. After the event, many colleagues approached her to express their gratitude. Some shared their stories of discrimination, while others spoke about their own insecurities. Amara realized that by opening her heart and sharing her struggles, she had created a space of trust and support. This exchange of experiences made her feel that she was finally fulfilling her mission. Amara's transformation was not just about becoming an advocate for justice. It was a journey of self-discovery and growth. She learned that true strength comes from recognizing one's own vulnerabilities and that compassion is a powerful tool. Looking back, Amara saw how each challenge had led her to a new understanding of herself and the world around her. More importantly, she understood that instead of fighting alone, she had found strength in community and in the connections she had cultivated along the way. Amara was at home, surrounded by the silence that usually calmed her, but now it left her feeling restless. The event at the hospital had been a success, but the emotional pressure she felt seemed to be growing. The next day, an important meeting with the hospital administration was scheduled. She was to present the issues raised during the event and discuss ways to implement changes. The responsibility made her feel nervous, but also determined. It was the opportunity she had been waiting for to be the voice for those who could not speak up. That night, as she watched her daughter Maya playing on the floor, Amara remembered everything she had learned. She had transformed from an insecure professional into someone willing to face challenges, but the shadow of doubt still followed her. What would happen if her words were not heard? What if the administration did not care about the complaints she was about to make? These questions tormented her, but Amara knew she could not let fear paralyze her. On the morning of the meeting, the atmosphere was tense. Amara observed the closed faces of the directors and the defensive posture of the administrators. She felt a knot in her stomach as she prepared to present her viewpoint. When she was given the floor, she took a deep breath and began to speak. Her hands trembled, but she remembered all the stories she had heard. She recalled the struggles of her colleagues and the courage she had found within herself. Throughout her presentation, Amara began to feel more confident. She spoke about the importance of listening to the voices of employees and patients, highlighting the need for a more welcoming and empathetic environment. As she mentioned the stories she had collected, she noticed some expressions soften. What had once seemed like a judgment room was now becoming a space for dialogue. However, in the midst of her speech, one of the directors interrupted. He questioned the validity of the experiences Amara was sharing, insinuating that they were merely personal opinions and did not reflect the reality of the hospital. The blow was hard. Amara's heart raced, and she felt the pressure rise again. The environment that had begun to open seemed to close quickly. She hesitated for a moment, but instead of letting herself be discouraged, she remembered what she had learned. Amara took a deep breath and looked into the director's eyes. Calmly, she explained that each story she had shared was a reflection of the reality for many. She spoke about how each person who feels heard can contribute to a healthier environment. This was not just a personal matter, it was a matter of humanity. The room was silent, everyone waiting for the director's reaction. Amara felt the tension in the air, but courage began to flow. She continued, now more firmly. If we, as healthcare professionals, do not listen to each other and take care of one another, how can we take care of our patients? The question echoed in the room, and Amara saw some heads nodding in agreement. The director, noticing the change in atmosphere, paused. Then, to Amara's surprise, he began to acknowledge that there were problems that needed to be addressed. He asked for suggestions and committed to listening more attentively to the team's concerns. The tension began to dissipate, and Amara felt that perhaps her words had truly found an echo. After the meeting, colleagues approached Amara, expressing support and gratitude. She realized that by facing her fear and standing up for what she believed, she had not only transformed herself but also inspired others to join her. Her friendship with Sarah solidified in that moment, and together they began to dream of implementing an active listening program in the hospital. Amara left that meeting with a sense of lightness, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. That morning, she had not only become the voice for those who could not speak up, but she had also discovered the strength that had always been within her. Looking toward the horizon, she knew that the journey was just beginning and that true change required commitment, but also hope and unity. She had faced her greatest challenge and in doing so, found not only her voice, but also a purpose. Amara's transformation was not just about being an advocate, but about the ability to listen, learn, and grow. And so, with her head held high and her heart full, she walked toward the next phase of her journey, ready to make a difference. Amara left the meeting with a mix of relief and accomplishment. The words she had shared reverberated in her mind as she walked through the hospital corridors. She knew she had taken an important step, not just for herself, but for everyone there. The atmosphere that had once felt oppressive was now lighter, and she felt warmth in her heart as she realized she had managed to touch others. In the days that followed, Amara found herself surrounded by supportive colleagues. Many stopped to talk, sharing their own experiences and expressing gratitude for her raising issues that many feared to address. This made her realize that she was not alone in this struggle. During one of those encounters, Sarah approached her with a radiant smile. "You made a difference, Amara. No one has ever spoken like that before. I truly feel that change is on the way." Amara smiled back, feeling a wave of encouragement. "I just spoke what many of us feel. It was time to be heard." Their dialogue flowed naturally, and together they began to plan how they could implement a program that encouraged active listening within the team. They wanted to ensure that all employees felt valued and that their voices were heard. The following week, the administration announced a series of open meetings where all employees could share their opinions and suggestions about the work environment. Amara was thrilled to see that her efforts were bearing fruit. She knew there was still a long way to go, but she felt that each step was an achievement. The fear that had once paralyzed her had now transformed into determination. At home, Amara also noticed a change. Maya, her daughter, was more excited and often asked about her mother's work. "You are a hero, Mommy," the girl said one time while coloring a drawing. Her daughter's words touched Amara's heart. She remembered how she always wanted to be an example of courage and resilience for Maya. The girl was growing up in an environment where voices were valued, and that filled her with pride. One night, while preparing dinner, Amara reflected on everything that had happened. She realized that the candid conversation she had with the director not only challenged the administration, but also inspired her colleagues to speak out. The hospital was beginning to transform into a place where empathy and mutual support were priorities. It was a new and invigorating feeling. However, not everything was easy. Amara knew that there would still be resistance and challenges ahead. In one of the subsequent meetings, some directors still showed hesitation in accepting the proposed changes, but Amara decided that she would not be discouraged. With the support of Sarah and her colleagues, she prepared to face new challenges. "Let's keep fighting," she told herself before each meeting. "Change takes time, but we cannot give up." On a particularly difficult day, Amara found herself with a group of demotivated nurses. They expressed their frustrations about the lack of recognition and communication. Amara listened attentively, and in the end, encouraged them to speak up in open meetings. "If we don't speak, no one will know how we feel," she said. Her words resonated, and some nurses felt encouraged to share their experiences. The transformation that Amara had initiated was not just about the hospital administration, but about the culture developing among the staff. People began to gather in support groups, and new ideas started to emerge. Change was happening, and Amara felt she was part of something bigger. Looking to the future, Amara felt optimistic. The challenges she faced had shaped her in ways she never imagined. She had become not just an advocate, but also a leader. The stories that were once silenced now echoed through the hospital corridors. And looking at Maya, who watched her with admiration, Amara knew she was building a legacy of courage and hope for the next generation. The journey was far from over, but Amara was ready to continue. She had found her voice, and now she was determined to help others find theirs as well. With each step she took, she knew she was creating an environment where everyone could feel safe, heard, and valued. Change was possible, and she was willing to fight for it. Amara knew that the journey she had started was not just about her, but about everyone around her. The open meetings and the courage that emerged among her colleagues were a reflection of what could be achieved when voices were heard. The resistance that still existed in meetings with the administration, however, did not demotivate her. On the contrary, it made her feel stronger. She had a purpose and a commitment to change, and that transformed her into a respected and admired leader. The atmosphere of the hospital, once heavy and tense, began to flourish into an environment of collaboration and respect. The nurses, who once felt invisible, began to share their ideas and concerns. Amara saw how her courage had spread like fire, igniting the passion and desire for change in others. The stories that were once silenced were now being told, and each voice that spoke out was a victory. But amidst this growth, there was a challenge that Amara did not expect. A group of directors, who opposed change and preferred to keep things as they were, started to act in a hostile manner. They tried to discredit Amara and her efforts, spreading rumors and creating an atmosphere of distrust. However, Amara refused to be shaken. Determined to defend herself and protect what she had built, she prepared to confront them. In a decisive meeting, Amara stood up and with a firm voice exposed the injustices that were occurring. She brought to light what had been said in the open meetings and the feelings of her colleagues. With courage, she showed that the problems were not just hers, but everyone's. "We are a team," she emphasized, "and the change we seek is for the good of us all." Amara's words echoed through the room, and seeing her colleagues' reaction, she realized that true strength lay in unity. The directors, caught off guard by the power of the collective, could not ignore the truth being presented. And to Amara's delight, the support she had cultivated manifested itself powerfully. Colleagues began to speak up, sharing their experiences and reaffirming the need for change. This act of courage and unity not only dismantled the directors' opposing efforts, but also brought a new understanding of the importance of empathy in the workplace. From then on, the administration began to listen more attentively to the voices of the employees and implement meaningful changes. Amara had become a symbol of overcoming, an example that one person's strength could have a profound impact on many. Looking back, Amara reflected on all her growth. She had faced fears and challenges that seemed insurmountable, but instead of being defeated, she turned each obstacle into a learning opportunity. What started as a personal struggle had become a collective movement, and the true wealth she found was in the friendships she cultivated and the voices she helped elevate. Amara's journey not only transformed her as a professional, but also as a mother. She became a role model of courage for Maya, who was now learning that with determination and unity, anyone can make a difference. The legacy Amara was building was not just about the changes in the hospital, but about the importance of listening, respect, and solidarity. And so, at the end of her journey, Amara made an invitation to all. Don't let your voices be silenced. Share your stories, fight for what you believe in, and support one another. Together we are stronger. It was a call to action, a reminder that everyone has the power to create positive change. And for those watching, she encouraged them to like and follow the channel so that more stories of overcoming and solidarity could be told. The transformation was just beginning, and the change was in their hands.